Up next from Beikai, for every design decision, a host of factors guide the outcome and subsequent user behavior. Often the factors are not rational or reasonable, but rather based on emotion. Behavioral economists are learning what designers already know instinctively. These emotions can be leveraged in the decision-making moment to achieve a desired behavioral end. David Fetherstonhaugh tells us how designers are using behavioral economics and why it is successful. From Kai Conversations. Welcome to Kai Conversations. I'm Steve Williams, and you're listening to another program on computer-human interaction from Beikai. This program is made possible by Beikai volunteers and the generous support of Beikai members like you. Thank you. And now, here's our program.
David Fenshaw / Fetherstonhaugh / Featherstone is our first speaker and went to grad school with me. He came to Stanford to study with Amos Tversky. David finished in 2000 and has been involved in many entrepreneurial projects. Started Agora, Networks.com while he was still in graduate school, and has done a lot of interesting things, showing a real bent for taking ideas and deploying them in ways that change the world. So it's quite logical that he would end up at this stage at IDEO, and I'm going to just invite him to talk about what he's doing there.
Thank you. Very pleased to be here. I'm going to talk today about the design of everyday decisions. You like that?
Yeah.
Good. I've been at IDEO for just a few months and came to IDEO because of an inspiration of seeing a connection between design and behavioral economics. And so I'm exploring a point of view at this point of how these two fields can come together and how behavioral economics can inform design. So in the top picture, what you see is a fly in the urinal. This is a urinal that's in the public men's room of the Amsterdam airport. And this particular fly purportedly has reduced spillage by 80%. In the bottom picture, we have this is at a Muni station in San Francisco, and a woman is passing a billboard that is advertising Bank of America's Keep the Change program. How many of you have heard of this savings? Okay. So for those of you who haven't, essentially a savings on the fly, so to speak, where you swipe your debit card, and if your purchase is $24.60, it will round up to $25 and then put 40 cents into a savings account. And this has been a huge success for Bank of America. I think since its inception in 2005, millions of customers, billions of dollars saved through this simple little mechanism. So my question to you today is, which solution was generated by an economist and which solution was generated by a designer? Right, so obviously it is up here because it's the opposite of what it appears. And the top solution was generated by a clever economist, and the bottom solution was generated by a team of designers. Actually, is IDEO that originated the first concepts, which we called Round Up, and became Keep the Change. The point I'm trying to make is that the solutions that each of these approaches come to often converge. There's many differences between them. But one thing I think they share in common is that they're both human-centered enterprises. So design takes people from where they are, with empathy, designs solution for the physical and attempts to the cognitive realities of being human. And behavioral economics does the same. And in fact, it grew out of, starting in the 70s, out of a reaction, I think, to neoclassical economists who, of course, kind of posit a human actor that is capable of far more than what behavioral economists say human beings are capable of. And instead of saying, so they basically say, hey, wait a second, let's go ask them. Let's go run experiments with them and look to human beings for the answer. And so it's this that behavioral economics and design share that I think leads you to solutions that you would misattribute to the other side. Yeah? So I'm going to give you several examples of that. First, let me kind of go through the beginning of my point of view on this, and basically to show you that it's this gentleman. This is Mr. Spock. And we've absorbed this cultural story, right, that human beings are rational. And, economists, this is more representative of the homo economists that economists have put forward and so-called tested with some validity. And when you come to design for this guy, right, you generate solutions that actually don't work for real human beings. So if you look at the savings account of consumers, what it is one big bucket in which you put all of your money, yeah? And Mr. Spock would have no problem allocating his income into various budgets and so forth and stay on budget. But that doesn't really serve the human being well because of emotions and proclivities that they have, impulses and so forth. And designers know this, right? And this is often the individual that makes design so effective, right? See, because design doesn't work for Mr. Spock. Design for him, right? We think of order effects or color or his ability to process information in a very good memory, unswayed by emotion. I mean, design just wouldn't work for him because he's an information processor. On the other hand, with Homer, who has impulses and so forth, these are the things that designers basically leverage. Now, I'm not putting this up here to cast aspersions to human beings. This is basically an exaggeration to show, look, we have another side, right? So the human mind is a mix of thoughts, feelings, emotions, habits, memories, and as a designer, what you're doing is I think, intuitively leveraging these things in the moment, right? So these are all things that are vying for supremacy, and a designer is intuitively leveraging these things, emotions or colors or memories, in order to inspire different actions out of the people they're designing for. And so context, right? I mean, this is kind of obvious. Context, manipulating context or modifying it is really the designer's stock and trade. This is what we mean to show with this equalizer, where we're basically leveraging these states of mind to achieve a certain goal. Now, marketers, right? Marketers will, modify context to reach a particular end, and this is really what I'm talking about. It's kind of a value-free tools, right, to change behavior. Designers at IDEO and other firms, in contrast to marketers, are really looking to help people achieve the goals, basically designing for the future self, right?
There's a couple of things that I think you're conflating that might be separated. And one is that we make decisions in part in flawed ways because our human reasoning is flawed. And that's the stuff you're talking about, appealing to the emotions. But every decision is an emotional event.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't want to get away from that.
Well, I actually it's common to hear that people have flawed reasoning, and that's really not my perspective. I mean, certainly when you compare it to the standard of the rational human being and logical conclusions, there are ways that human beings, they're not good calculators. So the point of view here isn't that look at people and how flawed they are. It's like, let's take them from where they are, right? It's really the latter point that I'm stressing. So my point isn't here to say that people are, irrational, and there's many books and points of view that have kind of highlighted that, and that often comes in comparison to economics, right? And indeed, it's useful to make that comparison, but not to demonstrate that how, the foibles of human beings. This is really from a designer's perspective of taking them from where they are and trying to help them achieve the goals they want to achieve. Yeah? So from a behavioral economist perspective, designers are really intuitive choice architects is what they are. And if you kind of look at the core, I think, of design, and it's kind of removing the robe, so to speak, what designers are often doing is trying to achieve a preference switch. So getting people to select option B when they would otherwise select option A. And I would submit that good design is about getting people to enjoy doing that, yeah? So let me give you a couple of examples. This IDEO and other design firms have designed ATM machines like these, and a lot of thought goes into these with interaction design and so forth. What would behavioral economics have to say about this? Well, a few months ago, there's a behavioral economist at the University of British Columbia who came out with some really interesting results that it turns out red, right, evokes risk aversion and changes people's decisions in terms of risk taking, whereas blue does the opposite, right? So what she had them do, her subjects, were various things, ask questions about risk preferences. Among others, she also asked, she had people design toys, yeah? So she gave instructions about having the participants design toys, and in one case, they were offered on a blue background. In the other case, the instructions were offered on a red background. And the blue background participants designed toys that were judged by independent raters to be much more creative. Yeah. So the question for a designer here is, what behavior will be elicited? Will their wallet be closed? Right? Will they tend to save more with a red background versus a blue background? So this is one element of several where a designer really becomes a choice architect in designing the decisions that people make. Here's another example of choice architecture, very simple, where on the right you have fig Newtons where 2 rows of 18, yeah? And on the left are fig Newmans, 3 rows of 6, right? And in this case, there's a stopping point. Right? And I haven't run this study, but I presume that there would be fewer cookies eaten here because of the architecture of the choice versus here with this 1 row of 18. And this is what I call the Pringles problem, is that there's no stopping point, right? And so as a designer, now designers intuitively, I think, do this and often do a very good job. Keep the Change has been a wild success. But what I'm here to say is, like, we can bring some of these results and these perspectives to bear in design to achieve even better outcomes. So, I think the big bullet point for me so far is that really decisions are the gateway to behavior, right? So if your goal is to change behavior, what you're designing for are the decisions. Change the decision, and you'll often change the behavior. Yeah? So the next part, what I want to do is unpack the Keep the Change program to kind of show you how a behavioral economist sees this great design solution. And this came about during one of my first meetings at IDEO, where I was sitting with a number of IDEO folks, and there was a partner there, and he said, people always come to us and say, design Keep the Change for us, right? And in fact, as I did my tour to other design firms, they too have people coming to them saying, design Keep the Change for us, yeah? Because it's a celebrated case with great results. And so I asked, do you guys know how to replicate it, right? Do you know why it works? And so what I'll show you here is why it works, and I'll give you a few comments on how to replicate it, which is really exciting to me because this problem, as you'll see, is more than just, saving nickels. It's great to save nickels and make them, ask Google, but it really it's really a solution to apathy, which, as I hope to show you, is a really big problem that if we have a solution for, can solve some pretty tough problems in the world. So I'll break it down into a couple of separate sections, and this is basically subjective valuation, how people value stuff. And in the first case, the psychophysics of value, and then this really nifty idea from Dick Thaler, who is one of the authors of Nudge. This is one of his early books from the 80s on mental accounting, and how that plays in and works as a solution to apathy. So let's hone our intuitions. I'll give you a couple of examples to see if these resonate with you. So you're in the grocery store, and how different is the decision if you're buying a pack of gum in the candy aisle versus when you're in the checkout aisle with a couple $100 basket of groceries? It seems to be so much easier to buy gum when you have this basket of groceries and when you're in the candy aisle. Why is that, right? If I told you if you were after some kind of iPhone adapter for your car, so you could listen to music in your car, and I say, look, this is a $200 item. If you drive to Mountain View, you can get it for $100, right? You'd probably drive to Mountain View. But if instead that product was embedded in a new car you were buying, I say, look, hey, you can buy this car for not $30,200 as you're going to buy it here in Palo Alto, but $30,100 in Mountain View. You probably wouldn't go, right? It's still $100, but somehow it's different. Why is that? Keep the Change will tell us. This generally is the way people value stuff. On the x-axis, you have actual value, whatever you're measuring, and then here is what it feels like, how it feels. And this curve represents this kind of desensitivity as you increase the actual value of something. And it applies to all sorts of stuff, some much more tidy fashion than others: dollars, light, sound, savings, energy, nutrition, donuts, yeah? For example, with light and sound, if you double the intensity of a light, right, you double it, it somehow doesn't seem to be twice as bright, yeah? You have to kind of turn it up more than twice as intense for you to register and say, oh, yeah, now that's twice as bright. The same thing with sound. This tends to follow a very tidy law, and it generally describes other things more loosely. Money is one of them. So, and this is why, if any of you have had this experience, that the second million that you earn or win never feels quite as good as the first million. Yeah? Right? Yeah. I'm only theorizing. So, let me go through a very simple and exaggerated example of purchasing milk through the Keep the Change program. So, here's a gallon of milk for $5.10. Yeah? And here we have, now on the y-axis, the pain of spending, still subjective value. And here are the number of dollars. So here's the pain of spending the first dollar, the second dollar, the third dollar. This, of course, is exaggerated. And what I'm going to do is basically stack them up to show the accumulated pain of spending $6. Okay, so now let's build out the curve, right? So here we have on the x-axis now actual dollars spent. And then there's $5.10. So here's the pain of spending the first dollar, the pain of spending the second dollar, not quite as painful, and so forth, yeah? And keep the change. The milk costs $5.10. It rounds up 90 cents, right? Now, this is back to the trident, yeah? This is the trident in the candy aisle, which explains kind of why you tend not to buy it there, because you're comparing it to zero. And this is trident in the checkout, where you're comparing it to, well, in this case, $6. You can imagine a $200 basket of groceries, it would be even more. This would even be less valuable. So this is the apathy, right? The annoying change that we get from purchases, if you're paying with cash. And Keep the Change leverages this apathy and it's not even a gift, it's their own money. You're just basically charging them more. And then this magic that happens through mental accounting, which is the second principle. And it generally follows this old adage, penny wise, pound foolish. And it follows the intuition that you find yourself or other people squandering $100, right, in some cases. But in other areas, they're trying to, be very careful about saving a quarter, yeah? This is basically the core idea behind mental accounting. So here we have Homer again, and he has a set of mental accounts, right? And the size of, bowling, donuts, girls, and beer, these are large for him because these are things that really motivate him, whereas saving for his son's college and his own retirement are kind of loom small, yeah? So we all have our own mental accounts that are meaningful to our lives. They, I think, create a lot of, interspousal conflict because, our mental accounts with spouses don't necessarily match. And, here are a few examples to kind of, again, hone your intuition. So there's this item of clothing, say it's a shirt, and you absolutely love it. It's exactly what you want. It's very expensive, really beyond your budget. But you can't help it. You buy it anyway. You go home, it becomes very painful, right? Because you really feel guilty about having spent that kind of money. So you seek relief. How? You go back to the store, you gladly hand the shirt back, and they hand you the $300. Now, how easy is it now to spend that $300? Lattes, restaurants, and it just feels like found money. Very different than the money you spent on the shirt, yet it's the same money, yeah? So these are mental accounts. In one case, it's the apparel account, which you mind your pennies in, managing your budget. And then there's this kind of found money account, right? Through refunds, tax refunds, for example, are spent very differently than money that comes from your job. Other examples. So, personally, this is my iPhone, and I have spent nearly 2 hours trying to determine whether I should purchase the $9.99 voice recorder app or the $3.99 voice recorder app. How many people here have iPhones who pain over, gosh, it's just an extra $1, right? Yet I have absolutely no dissonance that what I should be doing is rejiggering my 401k account after the financial bomb last September, right? And this is the remarkable thing about mental accounting is, I think annoys, we have, I think, at least one neoclassical economist in the crowd. In their models, money is fungible. $1 here is equal to $1 in any other account, yeah? But to the human being, rational ones, like me, who think about this stuff all day long, there's no dissonance for me. I gladly will, and I'm telling you about it now, and it's like no big deal. So this is the power of mental accounting, and it's so much around us. It's the air we breathe, right? And this is what makes Keep the Change so powerful. Let me give you another couple of examples. Banks have used this to great effect. So you've all probably experienced a non-sufficient funds check from, where you're overdrawn. And how annoying that is, right? You hate your bank, you hate yourself, the $25 charge comes, and it's just a reminder of what a putz you are, right? So what do banks do? They create this new category, mental account, called overdraft protection, right? What happens? So you charge it, non-sufficient funds, you get some rollover from a different account, and then you go, oh, thank you, bank, for having designed this great solution. And then you get this $25 fee, the same fee, right? But it's processed very differently because it's coming from a different mental account, yeah? Just this weekend, I think it was in Obama's Saturday address, he announced this new policy through the IRS coming in 2010, which leverages mental accounting. And it will allow, it's voluntary for employers, allow employers to set up a situation where unused vacation and sick time can be channeled into a 401k retirement savings account, yeah? Same with actually that's not IRS, this one's IRS, where if you get a tax refund, to streamline the transfer of that tax refund into a 401k account because Americans don't save enough, right? The savings rate was, I think, negative in 2005, and now I think it's 4%, but still not enough, right? So, and it's no coincidence this is coming from Obama. He has, among his counselors, a cabal of behavioral scientists, many of them behavioral economists, who have helped him shape his policies, helped him design the program for contribution to make a $10 contribution meaningful to his campaign, which I attribute not a trivial amount of his success for getting into office with these people. And I think, my guess is, I don't know for sure, maybe some of you in the audience do, that it's the same group of people that are counseling him. In fact, the co-author of Nudge, Cass Sunstein, is the lead regulator appointed by Obama now, which is hopeful news to me. Right, so have we honed our intuition about mental counting? Let me show it working in Keep the Change. So here we have the same curve now, and there's the 90 cents rounded up to $6. And here we have the same graph, just now smaller. This is now the mental spending account, yeah? And here's a new account called the mental savings account. And in this example, it's an actual account, but it's really, for the purpose of this, yet another mental account. So what happens with that $90 that we didn't care about? 90 cents, thank you. There it is. Okay, so we're going to move it. Yeah, we're going to move it into a different account. Now watch what happens here, right? Think of the Trident in the candy aisle. Then you go, wahoo, right? So it's only 90 cents, right? But it feels free. It feels like you're getting something, right? More than that, every time you swipe your card, it's kind of confusing if you think about it. I'm spending money, but I'm also saving money. And I'm not sure people really follow that it's, their own money. I think they really stop at the joy that they feel. It's a little bit of joy. Every time they swipe, you're kind of like stacking this joy on top of each other. And if you talk to people that have this account, not long ago I spoke with my realtor, and I told her I was at IDO, and I said, they designed Keep the Change. She goes, really? She grabbed me by the shoulder. She goes, I love that account. She said, I said, how much do you have in it? She goes, I don't know, about $500. But she just loves, every time she swipes, to be saving, right? It's a bit of a shell game, but it gets people to save, right? And it gets them happy about it, right? So this is really a solution for apathy, right? It's neat, it's impactful in this case, but it really, to me, is a model for designing for apathy in general. So the next question is, how do you replicate it, right? Can we replicate it in an even more impactful domain than in savings? Of course, the answer is yes. So there are kind of two tools, as it were. And if you find yourself kind of needing to design for apathy, is to recognize the apathy. And if you listen closely, you will hear it in different domains. I was on a observation a few weeks ago, and it was on energy. And the participant, who was a self-proclaimed environmentalist, was telling me a story. He, in fact, was the only one of all the group that we studied that knew what a therm was. Yeah? A therm, if you don't know, and I've, embarrassed to say, learned recently, is the unit of measure for natural gas. He knew because he had just completed a school project with his 6th grade son where they would track energy at the meter. Yeah? And they had done, I think, he said 4 or 5 laundry loads in the middle of the day, tracked the meter, and he said it only went up like 2 therms. And he looked at me and he said, what's the point? And and I heard that, and this is the apathy, right? And if you think about it, that's really troubling, because if this guy isn't motivated to save energy, we may as well pack up and go home, because this guy's at the tip of the distribution. And this is kind of what started me thinking about how to apply this. And so let's look to keep the change for the solution. So we've recognized the apathy, we heard it. What can we do to get this guy to care about therms, right? And so here's one example that I came up with. So he has a 6th grade son he's wanting to go to college. What would happen if you worked with utilities? Imagine this world for a moment, where they specified, look, if you save therms above this threshold, we will take a quarter of that value, and then we will transfer it into a college savings fund for your son. Now that, I think, and you hear keep the change in that, is a solution that would motivate him, right, to save therms. And I've worked with some energy projects, and I'm fairly convinced that people really don't care about energy. They care about other things. They care about money. They care about global warming, carbon footprint. They care about seals and ice caps and all these things that are motivating, but not energy, right? So I think one of the messages in energy and others is find out what they care about. Build on what's meaningful to them. That's just a design principle that is a tastier way to talk about this solution than mental accounting. Mental accounting is a very cool theory, but building on what's meaningful to people. And in this case, I think college savings account would be for this participant. Another example in nutrition, and this is an interesting one because it really changes the units for money. So you have someone who wants to lose weight, eat fewer donuts, right? There's some really neat websites out there now that amount to basically commitment stores, where you can go and basically purchase commitments. And the way you do it is by leveraging, what I would describe as social capital. So you make public to an inner circle of people that you care about, and they, you care about what they think of you, and you give them a report periodically once a week. Sometimes you can stake money on it such that if you fail with your goal, it might be smoking cessation or losing weight or exercising. I did it with exercising. Then this specified amount of money will be channeled to wherever you desire. Now, what some people do to really motivate them, if they're, say, of one political party, they'll actually set up a donation to the opposite political party as an extra motivation. Right, but the social capital, I think, is what's meaningful. So if I fail in my exercise program, I have to admit it to my friends, which is pretty painful, right? So not going for that run. I think my commitment was every 2 days I would exercise for 80 minutes, right? And I did that very carefully because I knew I would skip days, right? So I want to exercise 40 minutes a day. And so I said every 2 days. Right? So I could then, if I could bulk up on the last day with 80 minutes of exercise because I know myself, yeah? So that's another version of mental accounting where you're converting from donuts eaten or not eaten, right, to spent social capital with admitting to your friends that you have failed, yeah? And if you haven't done this and you have a goal that you want to achieve, I'd recommend playing with it. It really does work.
Oh, so I was just asking if your value scale applied the same way, that on the 5th time you failed, you told your friends that you'd failed at exercise. Yeah. Doesn't it get a lot easier?
Well, it's not something I want to test, which I think is kind of the point. So, I mean, you tell me if you're failing on your commitment to your friends. There's a referee involved here, I have to add, so that they're it might be your spouse or someone who's closer to, very close to you, can actually tell people if you actually did it. I mean, how would you feel if, you were failing 5 weeks in a row?
I don't know.
Yeah.
But I would say that it seems that one of the advantages of the Keep the Change design is that the advantage is outside of your action, outside of your control, as opposed to the exercise, which is entirely within your control. So if there was something about it that some aspect of the activity of exercising that was out of your control, for example, the way you look, that isn't really under your control. So the advantage of exercising isn't just that it makes you feel better or that it's healthy for you, it's that it actually improves the way you look, which then has all these other side effects in your social life that would be the equivalent, I think, in the model you're proposing or you're discussing here.
So the issue is...
Tell him he's arguing like an economist, using logic and watching real behavior.
Okay. Did you hear that? My guess is that, upon repeated failures, it probably does become less impactful, right? Theoretically. I'm not sure it kind of operates like that with social capital. I want to keep my friends, right? I want them to see me as able to follow through. So that's Keep the Change, why it works, and how to replicate it. And the point I want to make here is that I don't think a firm like IDEO would have been interested in behavioral economics 10 years ago. I'm fairly new to design, but what I know of its history, recent history, is that it's changed drastically, even in the last few years. Whereas before, it was pretty much, at least at IDEO, around product design. It has now morphed into much more. Not that IDEO doesn't do product design. It does it in a much more holistic context. And we've also moved into service design, right, which keep the changes roughly in there. What's happening now is that we're starting to brush up against policy, right? So IDEO has worked with the Centers for Disease Control to help them think about childhood obesity and create design solutions for it. We've worked with the Department of Energy to help understand what motivates people to use less energy. And the Acumen Fund where we're basically charged with designing a system to bring clean water to 500,000 of the world's least served people. Yeah? And this, I think, these are really big problems. And it's really exciting for design to start, I mean, certainly these days were very exciting. I think this was the first production mouse that IDEO designed. But it's really more exciting now because we're really starting to have a lot of impact. And for that, I mean, IDEO and other design firms are like kind of following the track of business schools who finally clued in, years ago that to stay relevant, they need to start hiring social scientists to stay current on its application to business. And likewise, IDEO, with these problems that they're being asked to solve, recognize that they need new perspectives to meet the challenge and design the most effective solutions possible. So that's it, and we have several minutes left if there are any questions.
It sounds good, but I wonder whether you're not hiding the dark side. Basically, IDEO, or an IDEO clone, is really being paid by, let's say, the corporation that is in the business of trying to make people do bad things for people. Mm-hmm. Isn't this a neutral science, and because the money is the corporation, it's going to be moved toward bad things for the society rather than good things?
Yeah. That's a really good question. And I guess I would start to answer it by questioning whether there is such thing as a neutral way to design. If once you appreciate, right, that optimal human beings are subject to systematic error, right? Another way to put it is they are basically kicking their future self in the butt, right? They're trying their best, right? Then it kind of necessarily means that an intervention to help them do better, achieve the goals that they profess they want to achieve, that they need help doing that. And I think that's the role of a designer, which it gets really uncomfortable, right? Because this idea of paternalism, right, and as Sunstein and Thaler talk about, libertarian style of paternalism, it's uncomfortable for a designer, especially if they're coming from the perspective that unbiased design is possible. So as a choice architect, how do you present choices in an unbiased way? Look at the lunch lady in the cafeteria, right? How can she present good food and the not so good food in a way that's neutral? I think it's impossible. You're either going to put the carrots up front or you're going to put them in the back, right? Or you put them side by side, but what happens if people come from the right versus the left? So that's what I would talk about, that's how I would address the unbiased part.
I didn't say what I was arguing. I'm sorry. What I was arguing is not unbiased. But the fact that, yes, you're altering by applying this new technology behavior, as opposed to what possibly they would do by chance. You can say you're altering it for the good of the future person, but you can be altering it for the bad of the future person by saying, okay, let's put the sweets at the front of the line.
Right.
And that's what Doritos wants you to do, and they're paying you to do it. So you're going to be, not IDEO, but that other idea, going to be designing for the worse, not the better.
Okay, so
The people who put the gum at the checkout counter.
right. So no comment about Doritos, but I think it's what's already happening, right? And maybe that's kind of the point you're making. But as a designer, right, who wants to design, so personally speaking, so people can achieve better outcomes for themselves. I mean, some might argue that even that you should back away from, right? But that presumes there's a neutral way to do it. I'm just saying there isn't, right? I mean, that's kind of a strong point of view. There's certain ways you can present things and try your best to make it unbiased. But I would argue that in most cases you can't. And we've been doing this, for years, just choice architecture, and it's a biased enterprise. And we use different words to describe it, but at its core it is. As far as the corporations go, a severe position would be not going to touch them. We're just going to design for people, for companies, clients that share my value system. Yeah, and there's another argument which makes a lot of sense. Is that I'd rather have them in my hands than the hands of a firm that maybe has different value set, because there's shaping that can happen over the years. So we have a new discipline that is relatively new discipline that is formed at IDEO called business design, who takes it as its goal to figure out business models that will actually work for the client. And it's not clear to me that, and this is something that's kind of an ongoing thing, is, let me put it this way, the goal is to figure out a sustainable business model where the corporation, the client, actually wins, as does their customer, right? And so that's really the Holy Grail. So, and until we can get the Holy Grail, let's try to approach it, right? So if clients come whose values maybe don't match, and really they're selling products that may not be the best for people, we have an opportunity to kind of influence the way they see health, right? And educate them, right? And that's a role that I think that is a useful one to take on. Yeah.
When this is sort of centered around Keep the Change, which you're using as the model for how behavioral economics can be applied to design. But when we actually look at Keep the Change, you make the act of saving automatic. So people are using their credit card, they're saving a little bit of money each time. They don't get the choice each time. It just happens in the background. The number is very round and nice, and they feel good about the fact that they've saved some money. And the savings account sort of automatically builds up some credit. My question is, doesn't that savings account then just feel like found money? And so using the other side of your argument, they then are like they're in love with their bank because their bank has just provided them with found money that they go and then spend. So is the actual ultimate behavioral effect on the end user beneficial or not? I mean, do you have a metric?
The answer is no. But it's a great hypothesis, and I just don't know if it's true.
So there's no, these people don't have a higher net worth or they just love their bank?
The question about whether this comes now from a mental account that's easy to spend from, right? I mean, it's a neat hypothesis. I just don't know if it's true, but it would be. I'd love to know.
Kind of a continuation on that question, actually. You're presented with a problem to get people to save more money, which had two parts: getting it to be automatic, easy, based on their behavior, which obviously was well achieved. But the second part was also having them save an appropriate amount of money. Keep the Change may or may not do that. I'm just wondering if you did any research as to how much money someone would save in a year, and how you determined if that was appropriate or the design trade-off between the two goals.
So I don't know what the averages are. I'm sure Bank of America does. They have reported of late that aggregate, this doesn't answer your question, I think they've reported $2.2 billion saved so far. And I don't, my guess is wasn't intended to be like a retirement savings system, but, it's a step in the right direction, which is very positive. But we have someone disagreeing with that. It's a step in the wrong direction, maybe.
Is that it? Yeah, okay.
Yeah. This is actually another follow-up question, and sort of a variant of this, which is, you said that when saving this extra dollar, people got the great joy of like the first dollar worth of saving. On the other hand, if they have $500 in her savings account already, you could also say that it would be the small joy of dollar number 501. So how come? What is the sort of theory principle that explains that?
So the apathy starts to happen in the savings account as well. It's like, what's another 90 cents? You know, I've swiped this thing 1,000 times. Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. I think it's you know, from certain perspectives, it might be true, right? And looking at their monthly savings account and see $500, and then next time they swipe, they think, you know, peanuts. You know, let me answer it this way. You know, I don't know if you're a latte drinker, but when you go into, there's this reset that happens, right? So when you go in to buy your latte, $4, it's like, you're kind of miffed at Starbucks because that's just too much for the drink, but you find yourself there the next day, right? Now, when you buy that next latte, you don't go, oh man, $8, now I'm really mad, right? You've reset, and you're back to $4, right? And in fact, you probably feel about as miffed about it as the millionaire behind you, who is also resetting, right? In some sense, he shouldn't care about $4, right? You know, high net worth, but he's comparing it to zero and his reset from the day before. So I'm not saying that, you know, at some points in the review of the account, people don't go, you know, and are subject to this kind of, you know, growing insensitivity. But the moment of swiping, right, I think you're not integrating all of that and calculating your net worth, subtracting, you know, this little bit. It's a new bit of, it's a new gift to you.
So, enough about small change. Let's talk about design. I noticed you called yourself a designer. And I noticed that when you're talking about this business design group, they're writing business plans. The term design has always been in English being a large term, but I'm having trouble deciding what to call myself. I think, like you, I'm more on the inventor end. And when the term designer starts to it's about invention, it's about business plans. What's it mean, and how do we decide what to call ourselves?
I had dinner with Don Norman here, and he told me this thing of Dick Thaler, who he's talking to, came to him, tell me if I have this right, Don, and he said, look, I'm writing this book, and he fashioned himself as a designer. Now, this is like, you know, an economist, right? He sees himself as a designer, and, you know, and I think, just as I think designers are intuitive choice architects, I think economists are intuitive designers, right? So I'm using the term broadly. So, you know, if you want to use a more restrictive term, you know, I suppose you can. I'm thinking in terms of a broad meaning. Last two, okay.
I think it's all very contextual, and in your particular case, I see you as a designer of behavior. And regardless of whether you have a neutral way of designing things or you have a skewed way of designing for Doritos, here the question is building a system of incentives, right? What is the incentive for somebody to buy Doritos, to save money, or to do anything at all? So presenting the appropriate artifacts to model that behavior and present, I guess, the usable solutions to pursue that particular behavior you're designing for your purposes is what you call yourself. You know, I designed sales engines for Cisco. You design, you know, something else. In the end, we all design, you know, behavior. What I'm interested, as a question, follow up to this comment, is can you point us after this talk to some user-centered, user incentive design papers or other materials that we can use to step a little bit outside of the conventional, you know, top 10 commandments of Jacob Nielsen, or really high level, you know, here is the ABCs of usability. Is there any studies that really provide newer or cutting edge techniques that you've used for your research? Or?
So 40 years of research, in fact. Okay. So if you're to go back, I mean, I think the magic of behavioral economics comes really from the insights from cognitive psychology and social psychology too. And the answer is yes, I can point you to things, and they're not hard to find. I'd recommend starting at the front and working back, and if you haven't read Nudge, that would be a great place to start, because it's the first book in quite a long line of books about decision-making and judgment that is prescriptive opposed to descriptive, right? So all these other books have been, you know, in a really neat way, categorizing and describing these really neat judgment effects. But nudge offers a way to now design, which is why I think Thaler fashions himself as a designer, because in there he makes prescriptions about how to design good stuff, right? How to design systems so people actually save enough. How to design systems so people, there's enough donated organs in a nation to meet the demand.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to the first remarks that started this discussion going. If you want a value-free, neutral system of measurement for consumers, it's called the Bureau of Weights and Measures. 1 gram is always 1 gram, 1 gallon is always 1 gallon. But to further respond to the suggestion that maybe there was a dark side to what you're doing, whether it's encouraging early childhood vaccinations or marketing tobacco to teenagers, you're always going to have that risk of things being used the wrong way. So that's all I had to say.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for making that point. I mean, this is a tool, right? Marketers use this stuff. Amos Tversky, before he died, basically, he sat in his chair and he said, you know, there's really nothing that I study that a used car salesman doesn't already know. Yeah? So this is quite a statement, but I think it's true. These are tools, and you bring your values to the tools, right? I think that's one of the take-home messages. And it means you have a lot of responsibility, right, to design in a way that doesn't reduce choice, right? It's the reduction of choice that I think really bothers people, and I think so it should. So it's not like we're reducing choices, but we do have influence over what choice, you know, which alternative people choose. And that's something that I don't have the answer. I mean, one is, look, if I'm designing for you, you tell me what goal you want to achieve, right? Look, I can't help myself when I'm walking down the food aisle in the supermarket. You know, jam-filled sausages, the super rich ice cream. So help me do better for my future self. Okay, I can solve for that in a very, in a way that where there is no ethical problem, because I'm helping you wear handcuffs, basically, yeah? So that you're only allowed to reach for the things that are you say you want for your future self. So that's one way out, but often you find yourself designing for people who are not explicitly saying, you know, I want you to help me be better to my future self. And there you kind of have to make a judgment call, and you insert your values in the process.
Thanks for listening to Beikai.
The post-production audio engineer for this program was Mike Seifried. Our website editor was Lisa Tyson.
This is Steve Williams. I hope you'll stay tuned for the next great program from Beikai on Kai Conversations. The background music is River from the album Eras by Curandero. The music of Curandero is available from Magnatune.com. We're extremely grateful to Parc for providing the George E. Paik Auditorium in Palo Alto. This program is made possible by all the Beikai volunteers who serve the Kai community and the financial support of Beikai members like you. Thank you.